All right, well, the Catholic Diocese of Buffalo has spent the last 4.5 years in federal bankruptcy court, brought on by literally hundreds of lawsuits from Catholics who say that they were sexually abused as children and that Buffalo's former bishops covered it up.
Well, tonight, 2 on Your Side Investigates is taking a closer look into the secret abuse files of the diocese, which could soon be publicly released for the first time.
Here is investigative reporter Sean Mickey with part 4 of our series, Faith and Follow.
Survivors are going to get crumbs that fall from the table, and that's not justice to me, Sean. It's not what they deserve, and it's not what they were promised.
4.5 years after the Diocese of Buffalo filed for bankruptcy while facing a mountain of child sexual abuse lawsuits, justice remains elusive for survivors.
The survivors, it's the victims that are being re-victimized again by how long this is taking and the added stress level to survivors who have been carrying stress and have been locked in an emotional prison for decades.
While bankruptcy litigation continues in federal court, the diocese says it's a new era of transparency and accountability.
Since I arrived here, I'm about accountability and transparency.
But the diocese is currently fighting in state court to prevent both the public and survivors from seeing 25,000 pages of its internal abuse records, subpoenaed by Attorney General Letitia James. The AG says the records should be public. I submitted an affidavit in court fighting for the release of these files because it's your right to see them. Attorney Stacey Benson of Jeff Anderson and Associates represents sex abuse survivors.
Releasing the files, at least detailing the complaints of sexual abuse and the inner workings of the decision-making process in the diocese, would demonstrate to survivors that the bishop is serious about being transparent and honest. They deserve it.
It's possible to put together the place, the time that it happened, or associates, and draw a conclusion as to who the claimant could be.
The diocese claims it's fighting the release of records to protect survivors. Meanwhile, clergy abuse files have already been publicly released after redaction in large cities like Los Angeles, Milwaukee, and Chicago. Kevin Brunn, a former member of the Bankruptcy Creditors Committee, disagrees with the diocese's assertion.
I think it's imperative that the public sees exactly what the devastation was caused by employees of the Diocese of Buffalo.
Maybe instead of spending hundreds of thousands of dollars in court fighting this issue, they could be spending their time redacting those names, redacting that information, and preparing it for public release.
It's that type of spending and lack of transparency that irked federal bankruptcy court judge Carl Buckeye. The diocese engaged in this extra litigation, spending over $100,000 without notifying bankruptcy court. Counsel may wish to challenge the merits of those arguments, but we see no benefit to the estate from efforts to silence the consideration of an opposing point of view, wrote Buckeye of the diocese's efforts to stop the local media from obtaining the records. He subsequently ordered compensation for the diocese attorneys be reduced by over $100,000. Bishop Michael Fisher declined to discuss this with me in an interview, instead sending me a document with bullet points that reads in part, "The files at issue have been shared with both the Office of Attorney General and in bankruptcy proceedings. Thus, they are not secret files and have been provided to those that have the need to see them. However, survivors themselves tell me that they have been denied access to these files. It's why survivors like Brunn continue to speak out against the diocese."
Everyone in life needs to stand up at some point, and this is where I've chosen to stand on behalf of survivors and victims, with the hopes that someday, hopefully sooner rather than later, that we can achieve some type of justice, Sean.
Now, a judge downstate is expected to issue a ruling on whether or not these files will become public within the next 2 months. Obviously, this would be a major step forward for survivors. Scott, Mary Ellis.
Yeah, no doubt about it.